Hey there, Soy Boy Roy here, coming at you live through the power of autism. Now, I promised I'd get a chapter out earlier, but I'm sorry. Things happened. But, yeah, consider this a late Christmas present, even though it's like a little into January. Alright, let's get started. At just before noon, the preparations were finally completed. The whole town was decorated, tents with delicious food had been placed all over, and various bands dispersed throughout filled the air with cheerful music. By this point, everyone had gathered in the town square and were eagerly awaiting the arrival of their honored guests. Eagerly, but silently, as an unusual hush fell over the crowd, their anticipation suppressing revelry for the moment. Then suddenly, Apple Bloom from her perch atop her sister's shoulders called out, "Hey, I see something!" Off in the distance, a tiny cloud of dust advanced towards Ponyville. The cloud grew closer, and soon the people could make out the forms of 5 riders quickly approaching the town. Finally reaching the first buildings, the 5 riders came galloping through the town streets before rearing their horses in a prancing halt in front of the crowd. They were the marshals, and looking exactly as the people had imagined. Each of the riders sat atop a massive war stallion clad in gleaming plate armor. Each rider wore a matching crimson cloak with burnished steel shoulder pads adorning the left shoulder. And of course, each rider wore pinned to their chest a glittering silver badge. The winged shield, the insignia of the marshals. That badge stood for everything these soldiers represented. As the elite guards of Equestria, by pinning on that badge, they vowed to travel as they culled and crush evil wherever it stood, defending the lives and freedoms of Equestria's citizens with every fiber of their being. To do this, they carried with them the final mark of their station. Over the right shoulder of each of the marshals peeked a glittering silver barrel of a spell gun, functioning somewhat like a wand. The spell gun had the added benefit of focusing and amplifying the power of whatever magic was cast into it. Powerful artifacts, these men had the right to use them however they needed in their quest to defend the people. Yes, these indeed were a group of Equestria's finest, the Royal Marshals. "Greetings, gentlemen," a distinguished, bespectacled lady with prominent white hair said as she approached the group. "As Mayor of Ponyville, I would like to be the first to welcome you to our fair town. We can't tell you how much we appreciate you coming out here. Now, I'm sure you'd like to see your accommodations and get you settled in, but we're just so excited to have you here that we wanted to throw you a party and welcome you in the traditional Ponyville style." She stood back and gestured to the festive grounds set out behind them. The leader of the party, a giant bear of a bearded man with brown hair and beard and blue eyes, trotted his horse forward, slowly surveying the town square with each heavy hoof-fall. The people waited anxiously. His face was impassive, stoic, and unemotional. Was something not to his liking? Oh no, he couldn't be. Was he upset? Angry? Had something gone wrong? Apparently not, because the martial leader then broke into a smile. "Well then," he said, "let's party." An enormous cheer went throughout the crowds, and the party did in fact begin. An hour or so later, the party was in full swing. People were dancing, singing, eating, and of course drinking. With so many fine apples around, Ponyville had no shortage of delicious brandies, cordials, and ciders to go around. For the adults, of course, the young ones just stuck to juice. Twilight made her way through the grounds, her studious nature compelling her to make sure that everything was going according to plan. Still, that didn't stop her from munching on a delicious apple crumble and humming as she walked. Just a little ways from the center of the square, Twilight spotted her friends Rarity and Rainbow Dash sitting at an open table. The athlete idly munched on a plate of cookies, while the fashionista stared intently off into the distance, a quill and a blank piece of parchment in front of her. "Hey girls, having—" "Shh!" A sudden hiss from Rarity cut Twilight clean off. What's with Rarity?" Twilight asked, leaning in closer to Rainbow Dash and whispering. "Not sure," the colorful fly replied in an equal hush. "Something about inspiration? She's been staring like that for a good 20 minutes. Turning and following the direction of Rarity's gaze, the sweater-vested librarian found her friend was staring at the table where the 5 marshals were sitting. They were laughing uproariously, clanking tankards of cider together, and seemingly having a grand old time. "Oh, it's no use," Rarity wailed as she threw down the quill in despair. "No matter how hard I try, I can't. I just can't." "What's wrong, Rarity?" Twilight asked, only mildly concerned considering how often her friend flew into fits of historic... Fuck you and your complicated words that I don't use because I'm a filthy accountant. Histrionic. Histrionic, there you go. Only mildly concerned considering how often her friends flew into fits of histrionic woe. "It's these marshals," Rarity glumly gestured. "You know how I'm trying to launch a new line of men's clothing, yes? Well, I thought that these traveling soldiers would provide the perfect inspirational spark that I needed to get going, but it's just simply not working, darling. Not at all." "Then what's wrong with them?" Twilight asked. "Oh, it's everything," Rarity wailed. Twilight simply looked at her in askance. "Really? Everything?" the sensible girl repeated in a voice heavy with skepticism. "Oh, but of course," Rarity replied, obvious to her friend's dubious tone. "I mean, they're simply not what I was expecting. I thought the marshals would be more heroic. Now, I certainly wasn't expecting them to have all this Adonis-like statures, but these men are simply uncouth." "Uncouth?" Twilight turned to look at the marshals again. "Come on, Rarity. Really?" Now it was Rarity's turn to look at her friend with incredulity. "Twilight, of all people, I expected you to pick up on the details." "Details?" the sweater-vested scholar asked with a sudden rise of curiosity. "What details?" "Yeah, what are you talking about?" Rainbow Dash asked, spraying the remnant crumbs from her last cookie as she spoke. Rarity took a moment to frown at the tomboy before she continued. "The one on the left, for example," the pretty seamstress began with quill used as a pointer. "Looks like he hasn't had a decent shave in days." "Maybe he's trying to grow a beard," Twilight offered. "Perhaps, but that doesn't mean it should be unkept in the meanwhile. Furthermore, the one next to him seemed to have spilled food onto his cloak more than once." "How can you tell?" Rainbow Dash asked, her face scrunched in confusion as she stared in complete incomprehension. The fashionista just rolled her eyes. "Please, darling, there are stains, and then there are stains. And let's not forget the gentleman on the right, who looks like he's been enjoying himself at the dinner table a bit too much of late." A little more scrutiny from Twilight revealed that indeed the man's midsection was much larger than it had once been, as it strained at his shirt and noticeably bulged over his belt. Come on, Rarity. It kind of makes sense. If you think about it. I mean, they've probably traveled a long time, so maybe they just didn't have any time to take care of that stuff." "That may be true," Rarity agreed. "But what about their behavior? Travelwear I can understand, but the way they act..." Twilight leaned over once more, narrowing her eyes in concentration. She really didn't see what had Rarity so riled up. I mean, sure, they were getting pretty loud, but it was a party after all. Okay, so maybe a couple of them were getting fairly red in the face, but that was understandable considering the circumstances, right? People drink at parties, and some get flushed when they do. And so what if the snippets of conversation drifting over were somewhat more mature than one might expect in polite company? Not everyone has the same sense of humor, right? "Maybe they're a little rough around the edges," Twilight acquiesced. "But don't you think you're being a little hard on them? After all, it's a party. They're probably just relaxing after a long trip." "I suppose you're right," Rarity conceded with a sigh as she slumped to the table. "It's just that, well, they're marshals. I just expected something more." "Oh, now you're just being silly," the bookish girl said, giving her friend a pat on the head. "Nah, I think she's right, Twi," Rainbow Dash interjected, now sipping on a cup of cider. I don't really get what Rarity's talking about, but I agree. The Marshalls should be way cooler. Cooler? Twilight asked, confused. How? I don't know. The young aviator shrugged. Like their clothes or something? Twilight continued. No, the clothes are fine. Is it their spell guns? She prodded once more. Those are fine. They should just be cooler. Like 20% cooler or something. Maybe more. Now both Twilight and Rarity were looking at Rainbow Dash oddly. How do I put this? The colorful one frowned as she pressed her knuckles to her forehead in concentration. Suddenly her eyes lit up and she turned to her violet-haired friend. I got it. They should be more like that guy I brought over. Immediately, Rarity's sapphire eyes flashed with illumination as well. Of course! Why didn't I think of that? Guy? What guy? Twilight asked, not understanding. The gentleman I brought over to the library, dear, Rarity answered. You know, the one I left with Spike. Now it was Twilight's eyes that sparkled with understanding. Oh, that guy! She nodded, having finally caught up. Yeah, that guy was cool, Rainbow Dash continued. Old man cool. Old man cool? Twilight and Rarity both asked. Yeah, Rainbow explained, using her hands to make odd gestures as if gesticulations could somehow help define what cool was. It's not just normal cool, like me. It's more like what old guys should be like. You know, that 1,000-yard stare after they see it all. That kind of cool. I guess I see what you're saying, Twilight said. Strangely enough, she sorta did. Like a rock. A rock? Rainbow Dash asked. Yeah, a rock. Like nothing's gonna move him or surprise him. He'll just be the same no matter what happens. Right, the athletic girl exclaimed. That's it. I mean, he was kind of built like a rock, too. I must have been going like Mach 3 when I crashed into him. Barely left a scratch. He was certainly rather impressive, Rarity agreed. Now there's a man I could find inspiration of. Broad shoulders, excellent proportions, those dusky gray eyes. Oh, idea! She sang, and instantly began sketching away at a furious pace. Yup, Rainbow Dash nodded snugly. Those Marshall guys have their fancy clothes and those fancy spell guns, but I think that guy was way cooler. Who was he, anyway? Twilight asked. Rainbow Dash opened her mouth to answer, but suddenly stopped. I really don't know, she said, sounding rather surprised. I don't think I ever got his name. Me neither, Twilight said. He dropped off a letter, but he didn't stick around long enough for me to ask. What was in the letter? Rainbow Dash inquired. That's just it. There was nothing. It was completely blank. Wait, Rainbow Dash said as she raised her hand for a pause. You're saying that I spent all morning running around town to deliver you a blank piece of paper? It seems like it, Twilight agreed. Whoa, weird. There, finished, Rarity said, holding up a complete sketch of a man's waistcoat. Oh, this is going to be simply magnificent. Hey, Rarity, the librarian began. Dash and I were talking about that guy, but neither of us really knows anything about him. We don't even know his name. Did he tell you anything? The young beauty's eyes lost focus as she came to the realization that her friends had. My goodness, no, she said, covering her mouth with mild shock. I was so busy with his clothes that I forgot to ask. As the friends were about to continue discussing about the mysterious traveler, a rather worn-out Applejack plopped down at the table and joined them. Oh, for land's sakes, she said as she flopped down onto the table. I like a good nip now and then, but those Marshalls just get me plumb tuckered out. What do you mean, Applejack? So, you know how he brought out all the good stuff for the Marshalls, right? The young cowgirl said, leaning in conspiratorially. Granny got some of the special Zap Apple brandy laid away for just such an occasion. Well, not some 20 minutes later, they all but finished it. So they go and send me back to the farm for some more. When I get back, it's all gone in 10. And then they sent me back for some more, again. Wow, you had to run back twice? Rainbow Dash asked in amazement. 3 times. Just got back from my last trip. Applejack sighed wearily. Don't get me wrong, I like providing hospitality for our guests, but this is just a little much. Grabbing Rainbow Dash's cup, she drained it before continuing. Maybe if they were more like that nice fella who came by this morning, I wouldn't be so worn out. Oh yeah, Rainbow Dash said, perking up. We were just talking about that guy. He went over to Rarities, who sent him over to Twilight's, but none of us got his name. Did he tell you anything when he was at the farm? Gosh, I reckon I didn't. Applejack murmured in wonder. Shoot, he helped me and Apple Bloom loaded up all the apples. I didn't even get to know his name. Oh, are we playing the guessing game? Pinkie Pie called out as she bounced over to the table. Let me try. Is it something tasty? Is it chocolate cake? It's chocolate cake, isn't it? Simmer down, Pinkie Pie. The freckled blonde laughed as she stuffed a cookie in her friend's mouth. We just talking about that new guy in town. It seemed like we all met him, but none of us know his name. I'm not gonna... It's mumbling, okay? That's what she's doing. Pinkie Pie is mumbling. Pinkie Pie said with a mouthful of cookie. Hey, come again, Rarity asked, after she swallowed. Pinkie Pie repeated. Is it a big guy with a brown coat and hat? Yeah, that's it, Rainbow Dash remarked, sounding quite surprised. How'd you know? He stopped in for breakfast this morning, before I told him to go to your orchard to find Twilight. I like him. He ate a whole pie by himself. A whole pie! Now that takes some doing, let me tell you, 'cause did he mention his name? Twilight asked, pursing her lips. Pinkie Pie leaned on her chin and thought. Hard. Gee, I guess he didn't, she gasped. Golly, you'd think I'd ask the name of a guy who could eat a whole pie by himself, but I was having so much fun writing for the party, I totally forgot about him, which is a shame, because anybody who can eat a whole pie has to be a great guy. I guess that's why I don't like the Marshalls that much. Sure, they can be great and all, but I haven't seen them eat anything yet. And if you don't like pie, there must be something wrong with you. Pinkie Pie continued, but her friends started to tune her out. You had to do that from time to time if you were friends with Pinkie Pie. Excuse me, girls? Fluttershy said softly as the 5 girls jumped. They just realized Fluttershy had already joined them at the table. While normally quite quiet, the timid one became more so in public settings, to the point where she was practically invisible in plain sight. What's up, Sugar Cube? Applejack asked as she got her heart rate under control. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, Fluttershy apologized, but I was just wondering if the person you were talking about was the one Rainbow Dash brought over earlier. Oh yeah, I forgot about that, Rainbow Dash said. I took him from Applejack's to Fluttershy's before he went over to Rarities. Oh, you met him too? Pinkie Pie gasped. Oh my gosh, that's so weird. Did the feller tell you anything? No, the quiet girl said, sounding crestfallen. It's such a shame. He seemed like such a nice man. I thought he might... But with a sudden squeak, Fluttershy trailed off. What's the matter, Fluttershy? Rarity asked, looking at her friend. Is there something on your mind? The timid girl looked around nervously, seeming conflicted on whether or not she should speak. However, her friends looking concernedly at her motivated her to talk. Well, it's just that he seems so nice. I was thinking that maybe he could talk to the Marshalls. Why? What's up with them? Rainbow Dash asked. It's nothing really, Fluttershy insisted. It's just that, well, their horses still have all that heavy armor on. I know they're strong, but it looks so hot, and I was wondering if the Marshalls had forgotten. Ah, that explained the hesitation. The only thing that could equal Fluttershy's love of animals was her desire to not hurt anybody's feelings. So, I was gonna ask him if he might, talk to them. The other girls stared for a moment in quiet amazement. Fluttershy almost never asked for favors. she hated to be such a bother. So the fact that she intended to ask a person she just met for help must mean that he was a very, very nice person. Or maybe he was just really good with animals. Well, it doesn't seem like he's around here, Twilight said, scanning the town square. But if that's it, I'm sure the marshals will listen to reason. I'll go over there and ask them right away. With that, Twilight stood up and headed towards the noisy table. How did he do it? Rainbow Dash asked in exasperation as their bookish friend left. I mean, seriously, how? What are you talking about, Dashy? Think about it. This guy went to Pinky's, to Applejack's, ran into me, stopped by Fluttershy's, paid a visit to Rarity, and then headed over to Twilight's place. And none of us even know his name. How does that happen? She didn't even notice herself, steadily flowing higher as her agitated tirade continued. Maybe because none of us asked, Applejack suggested. Oh, right, Rainbow Dash said, sitting back down in her seat. But, what if... Pinkie Pie interjected, carrying on where Rainbow Dash left off. What if he's a spy? Rainbow Dash's eyes widened into twin violet discs. She hadn't thought of that. Oh, please, Rarity scoffed. A man like him. Of course he's not a spy. Maybe he's a really good spy, like a super spy, Twilight replied. Ugh, Pinkie Pie replied. Yeah, Rainbow Dash retorted as she started to float again. I mean, the people here are like the nicest ever. How else could he get around without getting us to ask about him? Maybe because we were so caught up in different things, like getting ready for the party, that we forgot to be nice to him, Fluttershy murmured. Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash were about to retort, but both of them froze as they thought over what Fluttershy had just said. The eyes of Five Girls widened as they realized that may have been exactly what happened. Wow, Rainbow Dash said solemnly. We are terrible people. And how? Applejack agreed. Now, girls. Rarity smiled, standing up and putting away her parchment. Just because we made a mistake doesn't mean we have to let it continue. We'll find this gentleman and show him a true Ponyville welcome. How about it? Yeah, Pinkie Pie agreed, jumping up. This party is just getting started. Let's... The rest of her statement was cut off as a sudden shriek came from the direction of the marshal's table. The girls stared at each other in surprise, then began running towards the sound as fast as they could. That shriek sounded an awful lot like Twilight.
Hey, Lamau, baby! Woo! Fucking slag! Hello, you fucking slags! Get your fucking backs out!
Actual audio from the next chapter. That is hilarious. Anyway, favorite streamer is about to stream, and I can't miss it because he's the only guy I watch. So I'll see you next time. See you later, losers.